All right, so I remember last year at university, fall break was just coming to an end. And I remember talking to people after, ask them, how did your break go? How did your 1 week off go? And everybody I spoke to, they all said the same thing, that they just didn't have a good break. And so I asked people, like, what, you didn't spend much time on work? Because that's okay. You could just have spent that time elsewhere. But ironically, it wasn't just that they didn't produce any output, they didn't produce any work. It was also that they didn't have fun in that week anyways. Like, not only did they not work, they didn't enjoy that time that they spent anyways, right? Because if you're not going to be working, you should at least have something to show for that week. You spent this week with your friends, you did this. But everyone I talked to, that just wasn't the case. And so this got me thinking, because I'm like, all right, I got a lot of work done. I was able to lift and go to the gym, and I was able to, see my friends, and I was able to, head out of town, and I was able to do all these things. And I'm thinking, like, why was I able to have such an enjoyable break while everyone else seemed to just not enjoy their time at all? So that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to explore, just where that dissatisfaction comes from for all students, and how you can change and modify things to just lead to a more, fulfilled, happy, enjoyable student life. So yeah, I think our first step in helping you improve your student life, improve your satisfaction with your student life, is to first understand where that dissatisfaction comes from. Why don't you enjoy school? Why don't you enjoy your student life? And to do that, we need to think about, like, dissatisfaction in a more like general situation, right? And dissatisfaction comes from one major thing, and that's when there's a disparity between what you want and what you're putting in, or what you have, right? And so, if you think of this on a big scale, if you want to be rich but you don't put any work in to be rich, okay, you're going to be dissatisfied because you're not making progress towards being rich. You aren't rich, but you want to be rich, and so that's dissatisfaction. And so the same thing applies to different things in school. So for example, let's say you want to sit down and do schoolwork for some period of time, right? If you don't do that, if you said you wanted to work, if you said, I want to sit down and get done 2 hours of schoolwork, but instead you scrolled for an hour and then you got distracted and you went upstairs and you did something else, if that happened, you are going to be dissatisfied because what you wanted didn't match your input. Your input was, you scrolled and you got distracted instead of actually working. And so that disparity, that difference between your input and the output which you want, is where that dissatisfaction comes from. And so, I just gave a general example, and I gave, a more school-related example, but you can see how this applies to, all aspects of your life. And so if you want to, have that student life that you like, it basically means that if you have certain outputs that you want, you need to be doing the inputs to match them, okay? And if you're not going to do the inputs to match them, right, then you need to change the outputs that you want, right? Because like I said, if you have this big goal, let's say you want to, have a six-pack and you want to be ultra fit and have this amazing body, but you don't want to go to the gym, you don't do the input, you're going to have that dissatisfaction. Now, if you don't have that goal, to have the six-pack, to have that body, well, now not having it doesn't make you dissatisfied because you didn't want it. That wasn't a goal. So all we need to be doing is we need to be, like, shrinking the gap between our outputs that we want and the inputs that we're willing to put in, okay? Because it's not just a gap between what we have and what we want that creates dissatisfaction, right? Because let's say you have a goal, okay? And you're progressively working towards that goal. Even though you don't have that goal yet, you're not going to really be dissatisfied. You're going to be enjoying that process, right? But it's not putting in the progress. It's not making that progress. It's not doing the inputs. That's what creates the dissatisfaction. So if you want to build that student life that you like, or if you want anything in life, okay, it just comes down to taking your outputs, your goals that you want, and seeing if your inputs or your actions align with those outputs, right? Because if they don't, that's going to lead to dissatisfaction. And that's why, all these students over the reading week that I said, or the fall break, that's why they all said that they had, like, a terrible reading week. It's because they had certain expectations or goals and they didn't meet them. They wanted to get work done. They wanted to hang out with their friends. They wanted to do all these things over the week. But when you didn't do those things, okay, now you didn't make progress towards any of those things. Now, yeah, you're going to be dissatisfied. You're not going to have enjoyed that time, or you're not going to have, like, perceived that time is spent well, because you didn't do it on what you said you wanted to do. So then you have two options. You have two things that you can really do. You can bring the outputs down, bring the goals down. Let's say, your goal was to get, or you wanted to be able to get, 10 hours of studying done over the course of the week, okay? Let's say you're consistently not able to do that. Well, you could just bring the goal down and say, yeah, I only want to get 2 hours of work done. But then, of course, you have to deal with the fact that 2 hours of work probably isn't enough to accomplish the bigger goal, which is to get the good grade in the class. So you can adjust your outputs, and that's an option for many things, but that can often be actually harder than just adjusting your inputs, right? Changing the actions, right? And so that's what I would offer the solution to this be, is to change your actions, change your inputs to match the outputs that you want. And once you do this, okay, now you're not going to be so dissatisfied. So to do this, in order to, change your actions, first you need to understand what the outputs are that you want, okay? What is the goal here? What's really, the purpose of your actions? And then we can see if your actions align with that, and if they don't, we can adjust them. So you got to start by asking yourself, what are the goals? What do you want from this, okay? Are you trying to get, perfect grades? Are you trying to just pass your classes? Are you trying to, do all right? Are you trying to just get a certain amount of studying done? Are you trying to do better than you did before? Whatever it is, you need to have a goal, okay? Because if you don't know that goal, if you don't have that, if you don't know, like, in the back of your mind what you're working towards, okay, then your brain's never going to be able to tell, okay, are we satisfied? Are we dissatisfied? Because you just don't know, what the goal is. And also, having that goal helps because when you have direction, it's so much easier to move towards something, okay? For example, I've been training in the gym for 2.5 years now. And every time I go and I like it and it's enjoyable and it's fun. But every once in a while, there's ups and downs. Sometimes training is good, sometimes it's not as good. And that's not something that I can always control. But one thing that I did notice is that this past summer, I signed up for a half marathon, okay? And I signed up 2 weeks before the race. And now in this 2 weeks, I had a proper, strict goal. I was going to run this. I wanted to get, 2 hours. I wanted to do this. I had a date that this training needed to be done by because it was 2 weeks away. And so I locked in and I was able to train hard for 2 weeks for this thing, okay? And I was really motivated to do this, even though before this I hadn't really run. I didn't really enjoy running, but because I had that goal, it was so much easier to work towards, okay? Otherwise, it's really easy to just get distracted, to just push things off, okay? This is why a lot of people, kind of struggle with the gym because they just kind of go, they don't really have a goal, they don't really know what they're in there training for. It's just, people say going to the gym is a good habit, so they try to go, but without a goal, without saying, I want to look like this, I want to gain this much weight, I want to lose this much weight, I want to get, this much better in cardio, without having any goals like this, okay? It can be really hard. It can be really easy to get distracted and to just, skip the gym, okay? Because you don't have a goal. What are you really going for? You really need to have these things, these motivations, these for reasons behind what you're doing, the things that you're doing. And so yeah, set some goals, okay? And it doesn't just need to be school. It doesn't just need to be like, I'm trying to get these grades, I'm trying to do this well. It can be like, I'm trying to see my friends, this many times a week. I'm trying to go to the gym this many times a week. I'm trying to do this thing with my family. I'm trying to, learn this hobby. I'm trying to get these grades. You think about if you're trying to build, that student life that you want, okay, set goals for all aspects of the student life that you want. If you want your life to just be school, okay, yeah, sure, go set goals for just school. But if you want to have other aspects of your life, if you want to be like building a good social life, if you want to be building, a physique in the gym, if you want to be doing all these things, okay, have these as parts of your goals, okay? Really just think like in detail, what is that student life that you want, okay? Be as detailed as you want, okay? I want to go to the gym 5 times a week. I want to go for a run twice a week. I want to see my friends twice a week. I want to go on a date twice a week. I want to get these grades, so I want to spend this much time on school. And you just list out, exactly in detail what this perfect student life is for you, okay? And then here's the thing. And now we see, these are all the outputs that you want. Now what you got to do is look at your inputs. Look at what your day-to-day looks like. Are your inputs matching the outputs? Are they bringing you towards the output? If not, then that's where that dissatisfaction comes in. That's a big reason by why you probably don't enjoy student life, why you don't enjoy your university life as much as you could. If you're in the gym and you're trying to gain weight, and let's say you're trying to gain 10 pounds in the next 2 months or something, okay? If every week you see the scale going up, you're getting closer and closer towards that goal, okay? And so you're going to be satisfied with that. You're making progress towards your goals. But if you weren't, if you were always at 0, or you see the numbers go down and they go up and then they go down and you're not making any steady progress, that's where that dissatisfaction comes from. The same thing applies here, okay? If you have these goals, if you have these things that you want to do, but your actions aren't there, okay? If your goal is to do very well in your classes, but you only spend, 30 minutes a week studying outside of class, well yeah, of course, that's not going to work out, okay? So what you got to do is analyze and say, hey, what are these outputs that I want, okay? And what are the actions that I'm doing? And I think you'll see that, most people, the actions they're inputting are not taking them any closer towards your goals. And that's a big thing, right? You want to be putting as much time towards these goals. You want to be putting as much time into the things that are going to take you closer and closer to that life that you want, okay? And so again, this isn't just school. I'm not saying put all your time into your school, but you probably have aspects of your social life, of, your fitness, of your health, all these things are all things that you're trying to build up and work towards, okay? And so analyze the actions that you're inputting on a daily basis, okay? Does 30 minutes of scrolling a day serve you? No, it's not really taking you towards your school goals. It's not really taking you towards your, social life goals. Why don't you just go spend time with your friends anyways? And it probably isn't bringing you closer towards your fitness goals. So analyze these things, okay? Take a look at your inputs, take a look at your outputs, see where the difference is, okay? Because that difference is the dissatisfaction. And then you need to decide, am I going to lower the output? Am I going to lower the goal? Or am I going to raise the input, the action, okay? Those are your options. That's what you got to work with. So now, once you've done that, once you have that, those goals, those realistic things of what you're actually, willing to work towards, now you just need to budget the time to do these things, okay? And how do you do this? Well, I think a good thing to do is to set up an ideal day. Really think about, what does your ideal day look like right now as a student, okay? Because realistically, it probably isn't wake up late, get to class late, scroll, skip the gym, go home, sleep, eat. Like it probably isn't this, even though sometimes your days will be like that, okay? So what we want to do is we want to, think about what our actual ideal day is that is going to get us towards the outputs that we want, right? We have set the outputs now, and now we want to control our inputs, okay? And the best way to do that is not by just waking up and trying to analyze every single action we do during the day, because that's going to be very hard. It's going to be very difficult to always be thinking about, okay, is this bringing me towards my goals? Is this putting me away? Is this going to be leading me towards that better student life that I want? That's hard to do during the day. So we want to do this, in advance, okay? So think about, what does your ideal day look like? What does your ideal week look like that's going to get you the outputs that you want, right? So if you want to build that physique, that body in the gym, okay, well, then we need to be budgeting, 4 or 5 days in the gym, okay? And if you want to get certain grades on the test, well, now we need to be budgeting a couple hours a day for studying and for schoolwork, okay? And so really just go through every aspect of the day, not just the stereotypical goals like health, fitness, okay? How much time do you want to spend with your family? How much time do you want to spend with friends, okay? This is your actions. This is your inputs, okay? And these actions and inputs, you are just kind of organizing them throughout the day, organizing them throughout the week, making sure that the time and the energy is there in order to, reach those outputs, reach those goals. And that's pretty much it, right? If you have these goals, if you have these outputs that you want, okay? And now you have controlled the input. Now you're, doing the things that you need to get you there. Well, now you're going to be a lot more satisfied, a lot more enjoying of your student life. You might ask, okay, well, that doesn't leave too much time to have fun, okay? But here's the thing. Is working towards goals fun? Well, yeah, of course. There's fulfillment there. There's a reason why you were dissatisfied when you weren't working towards them. And when you were meeting the goals that you want, when you were hitting that good workout in the gym, when you were able to spend the time that you wanted to spend with your friends, when you were able to get that work done, all of these things feel good, okay? So it's not fun in the traditional sense, but the fulfillment feels good. And isn't that the goal? The goal is to feel good, right? So there's time there. There's fulfillment in, making progress towards the things that you want to make progress in. But also once you've set in your ideal week, your ideal day, you've kind of cleaned up a lot of the bad habits out of your life. And of course this takes time. This isn't instantaneous, but as you make progress towards this, you start removing and mitigating or minimizing the amount of bad habits that you're doing, okay? And once you don't have these bad habits, it tends to make good habits feel just a whole lot better. And that's because you're not so used to the stimulation that comes from bad habits. So there's that too, but also just think about it. Think about a day, okay, where you get up, you get a couple hours of work done, you go hit a workout with some friends, you spend some time with them later, maybe you eat dinner, you get some more work done, you go out in the evening, this is a full day. You've got work done. You've checked off the health boxes, the fitness boxes. You've eaten well. You spent time with friends. You've had an outing. That's going to be a good day. Is that not a fun day? So when people say, okay, when are you going to do fun if you're always going to be working towards these things? Well, the things that you're working towards should be things that make your life better. They should be things that you enjoy, things that you are fun to you. And I'm not saying that, sitting down and doing a reading or something for school is always going to be the most fun activity, but if part of your day includes that, if part of your day includes a 2-hour workcast that you can feel good about after, well, that's fine. That's a win. You still had a good day. You got work done. You spent time with friends. You went to the gym. You did all these things. That's going to be a good day that you would call a win, that you would say was fulfilling and felt good, at the end of it. So think about that, because of course there's always time for that more, traditional, what you would say fun, okay? There's always room for that. But on a day-to-day basis, okay, a lot of the things that you do, if you do them well, if you meet the things, if you meet your expectations for yourself, that ends up being a fulfilling and enjoyable day anyways. So keep that in mind, because you're not depriving yourself of fun by going to the gym for a couple hours and spending a couple hours working. That's just not how it works. And so that's it, right? If you want to improve your student life, enjoy your student life more, okay, you just need to change your inputs and your actions in order to meet the outputs and the goals, the desired outcomes that you want, okay? And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to put in the work, the action, the inputs to meet those goals, okay, then you need to be bringing those goals down, because otherwise you're just going to be dissatisfied. That's just how it works. So thank you for watching. I hope this video has helped you.